Hello and welcome to Collapse Club, where our topic is how shall we live in the time of collapse? I'm David Baum in Seattle, and with me today is John Doyle. Hello, John.
How you doing, David?
John is a legit citizen of the world. Please tell us about your job, John, a little bit.
Well, I'm employed by the European Commission, a remarkable organisation, but part of the structure of the European Union. I've worked a lot in Foresight in times past, but I am a systems engineer by trade. I'm fascinated by the way systems come together and even more fascinated by the way systems come apart. I speak today as a private citizen, a citizen of the world. The views expressed hereafter are not those of the European Commission, they are mine.
Thank you. So, John, you have concluded that human beings are going extinct to a high degree of certainty. Could you tell us about that conclusion?
Yeah, pretty easy. It's difficult for people who are siloed in one silo or another to kind of maybe step back and take a systems view. So I'm an engineer, and I found, oddly enough, even though I'm not maybe the world's greatest engineer, but in terms of viewing systems, I understand systems pretty well. As I said to my brother recently, there's very little argument amongst scientists, particularly evolutionary biologists and people, that the human race will go extinct at 3 degrees centigrade. Pretty much all life on Earth will probably go extinct at 5 degrees centigrade. We're already at 2.2, and it's accelerating. There are a couple of huge curveballs coming down the track, by which I mean the disappearance of Arctic sea ice, which will add an incredible amount to the heat of the system, and the extraordinary levels of methane that are rising and rising and rising. It would be an immense surprise to me if within a decade we are not at about 6 degrees. Ergo, we go extinct.
All right, thank you for that. I'd like to mention that if you want more information about John's work or his views on the topic of extinction, you can look at the videos that are listed in the video description under this presentation. He's been around and has talked about those things in depth, so please check that out. I'd also like to welcome the people in the live chat. Beryl is here. Hello, Beryl. Thank you so much for coming. Jordan and Karen Perry are here. David and Jan, thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll try to notice them and get to them. Okay,
quick
John.
Thumbs up to Beryl for the conversations that she had over the last couple of days with William. Blown me away, in particular because I'm a William Blake freak, and it was lovely to see that William so into William Blake. And it's just that the breadth of those discussions was marvelous, and even more wonderful than William's apparent encyclopedic knowledge of absolutely everything was Beryl's extraordinary ability to get to the nub of each and every question with that fantastic accent. So there you go.
Thank you for that. Okay, given, John, that you think humans are going extinct soon, how is an enlightened person supposed to respond to the prospect of collapse?
Well, as a non-enlightened person, I mean, I'm not sure what's an enlightened person. It's a fantastic question. And there are moments where I see with great clarity, and there are moments where I see nothing. How is a person, I've shorthand for this that I've said a few times recently to people. When there's nothing you can do about it, then everything remains to be done. Everything of value remains to be done. So what should we be doing? As I've said, within any sort of scientific assessment, and I consider myself, at least scientifically competent, if being an engineer, there is a 100% certainty that we go extinct. It's important to say that's a 100% certainty. That's a scientific assessment. It's not necessarily the way the universe will see it. Maybe there are little green men going to come over the horizon with massive CO2 and CH4 hoovers and suck it all out of the atmosphere and sort of say, okay, the experiment is over. Here's the nice clean power source. Or, here's the lentils you should eat for the next 500 years. I have no idea. This is not unimaginable. It's probably pretty unlikely, but as I say, 100% scientific certainty. So given those circumstances, and given that the understanding that most, what will I say, I don't want to quite say mystic because it pushes things a little bit too far, but mystic in the sense of connected to nature is distinct from human beings being somehow above and separate from nature. So mystic understanding from, let's say, Meister Eckhart across to the Buddha and to Lao Tzu. Given that most of those, a lot of insight that would come from these sources would point us towards what life does being, well, what life does. Birth, death, if those things exist, pain, loss, all these things have a function in the wholeness. So there is a function to the knowledge or acceptance of our collective demise within a relatively short period. It means something, not in terms of something external to what's unfolding, but it is of itself worthy of being addressed head on. To get straight to the core of things, my mother died a few years ago. Fabulous death, reasonable, good life, surrounded by her kids, us sitting around in her room as she died, having a few drinks, taking turns being with her, holding her hand, watching her pass. Was this completely and utterly? Was this a completely and utterly pointless activity? Possibly. Might have been better if somebody had a humane killer and knocked her off and dropped her in a hole on the ground, and maybe we would have saved a hell of a lot of time, But there were tears, there was laughter, there was love, there was caring, there was reconnection, there was connection. One of the things I was impressed with in Beryl's chat yesterday was the notion of remembering. There was the putting back together of the members, the dismembered portions of the family reconnecting in this way. So how should we face it? I'm not sure that we necessarily need to explicitly face it. We need to know it's there, and we need to react. I didn't need to call my brothers or my sisters every second day because they're in Dublin and Ireland from Brussels and sort of say, so how's she doing now? What's the pulse rate? Is she nearly at the edge of the cliff? How close is she to the edge of the cliff? There was an unspoken and deep understanding that my mother was dying. So I had gotten home for a little while. My wonderful younger sister has looked after my mother, lived with her and looked after her for some of her declining years. And in the year prior to that, my mother's one of her sort of last wishes was that my sister, who had always wanted to do a few stages of the Camino de Santiago, she's not crazy enough to do the whole thing, that she would actually do this, and that somebody else would look after her, and I was elected. So I came home and I had that extraordinary kind of 10 days where I was with my mother, the primary caregiver, and that was what does any of this mean? I have no idea. But I think we did what we did. It's kind of a logical non sequitur to say we would not have done it had my mother not been dying. But what we did brought us to a very different place.
So what then is the, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
What is the analogy from your family story to the worldwide situation? What What happens when Mother Earth dies?
I'm not, yeah. Okay, Mother Earth dies. I mean, I'm a big fan of George Carlin, and he has this wonderful, wonderful piece where he talks about, uh, ecologists and save the planet. And he said, save the fucking planet. We don't even know how to look after ourselves. And he says, besides, the planet's doing fine. The people are fucked. Which is one of the best lines I've ever heard in a comedy show, and it's about 20 years old. It's an amazing track. Look up George Carlin on ecology if you're listening. So this planet, or whatever, this universe, has proven to us that it, as Alan Watts would say, it peoples. It produces people. As an apple tree, apples. So people have been here. We have been here. We are going away. The void was once fruitful. It will be fruitful again. The wonderful Ramana Maharshi's final truth was there is neither creation nor destruction. It's this. We don't understand this. Roger Penrose, the recent Nobel laureate in physics, talks now about, in an ever-expanding universe where time is stretched to this infinity. Well, does time stop? Does it just clap and come back again? We have no idea. Is this an in-breath or an out-breath? I'm very attached to the notion that we are part of whatever, we are all inherently a fractal part of whatever has exploded and spread across this universe. In that wonderful universe manifesting as John Doyle in this moment. You're the same thing manifesting as David Baum. Wonderful. What happens when it stops? I have no idea. But I do have a connection, an increasing connection to the notion that it's okay. I'm not even sure what it's okay means, but I was always going to die. My mother died, and what exactly does that mean? I suspect it means fantastically little, and it's not worthy of anger and frustration. It's worthy of living in a different way.
Many people around the world these days are scared and racked with grief, sadness, horror, etc. It seems like something really terrible is happening. What do we have to say to them?
First and foremost, I may be a bad person to ask that question of, because my life was sort of inverted. I was a very, very tortured and unhappy child, much in love with death. For reasons I'm not sure I even understand. I have a marvelous lady that I see, who's a psychosynthesis, so the work of Fagioli, and that's putting this together for me. And so my life has had an almost opposite course. I was miserable, and I'm getting happier. So, which is, whatever. There has to be one, doesn't there? So I wouldn't presume to give anybody any advice on how they face their lives. What I would presume to do would be to suggest as strongly as I possibly could that those lives be faced. It is, as my eldest son would say, it is what it is. But this is what it is, and there is no running away from it. And you will feel that dans tes tripes, as the French say, right in your guts. You feel that. You feel that in your guts. And as my eldest daughter would say, you have to go with that gut feeling. That must be embraced. And there are feelings of horror and loss and sadness associated with at least 50% of our lives. It's yin and it's yang. Those feelings have as much value as feelings of joy, pleasure, and fulfillment. I was just listening the other day to Khalil Gibran's marvelous My Defeat. extraordinary poem where he talks about how precious are his defeats, because they're his. He and defeat can be together, whereas success gets you put on a pedestal with laurels around your head and you freeze into nothingness. So my understanding of living well is something more like accepting with equanimity both the dark and the bright. I have a sister-in-law who's obsessed with magpies, because we have this kind of superstition here. If you see one magpie, it's for sorrow, and 2 are for joy, and 3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. There's a whole kind of a rhyme about this. And every time she sees a single magpie, she sort of says, "Oh God, somebody else look at it, because if 2 people see it, that rules out the bad luck." Or she'll say something like, "Hello, Mr. Magpie, and hello to your wife and kids." The implication being that somehow she was associated with the second one. But you got to embrace one magpie and you got to embrace 2 magpies, because okay, sorrow is coming, so is joy. You don't have one without the other. You don't have a wave. There's no such thing as the crest of a wave. There's the crest and the trough. That's what it is. Yeah. Ooh, sorry, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, I understand what you're referring to, and that corresponds to my view as well, philosophically speaking.
Yeah.
In the circumstances we find ourselves, I'm sure you're aware there's a debate about whether we have, as humans, have an obligation to fight, that we should be doing everything we can to reverse climate change and find solutions and somehow maneuver our way to safety.
Yes.
Do you think
Yay,
that
Tao and the Mere Reflection Project, or let's kind of start sending drones over airports to make airplanes crash, and Extinction Rebellion, and blah blah blah. Yeah, all that good stuff. Yeah.
Do you think that we have an obligation to act in those ways?
I think there's a great insight from the caste system in India. So you've got the priests, you've got the warriors, you've got the workers, and maybe there's part of that caste in all of us. I think the warriors should fight, and I think the priests should be contemplative, and I think those who I'm not in a position to give instructions to sunflowers to produce potatoes. Sunflowers follow the sun. Potatoes produce potatoes. So you do what it is you do. I'm often astonished at the things I do, and even more astonished at the things I don't do. So up until COVID, about 2 years and a couple of months ago, I was a hectoring warrior. I was of the warrior class. I was Arjuna, and I had listened to Shiva telling me to get off my ass and go and fight. Beautiful, not a problem. I was just rereading the Bhagavad Gita the other day, and yes, and I fought everybody and anybody about everything. I'm less sure now that who I am today is necessarily that fighter. I find at the moment having a conversation like this means more to me than going down and kicking on the door of a senior commission official and saying, "For fuck's sake, why are we doing this?" Having said that, I'm currently in the middle of a fight with at least 3 different services for saying, "For fuck's sake, why?" So I'm not entirely sure I can answer your question. In what does this fighting consist? It's difficult for me to give current examples, because they would reflect badly on colleagues, and I don't have the right to discuss them. So let's move away from that and sort of say, yes, I have spent probably the better part of the last 20 years being in a state of near constant animosity with most of my colleagues, on this issue, while happily doing my day job. I'm very good at my day job, which has nothing to do with climate change in general. And let's look at something else. One of the things that has struck me recently is that at all times when I've been communicating in the past, I've probably been really angry. And then I have wondered to myself, embracing notions such as Eckhart Tolle's pain body. What's actually been going on in terms of communication? Has this been John's pain body hectoring somebody else's pain body? And then to everybody's amazement, nothing changes. So that's where I am kind of at the moment. That's where I like to think I am. But it takes very little for me suddenly to be back in the battle and fighting. So I'm working really hard with some fellow engineers on alternative energy systems, although I don't, as I say, my feeling is even if we get them off the ground, they'll be happily producing beautiful, clean energy for nobody. I'm working really hard on food systems. So I'm very active and I'm very bolshy in my day-to-day interactions. I have a number of high-level political contacts going on. I'm doing everything I can. While thinking to myself that I'm being terribly zen. So do we have an obligation to fight? It's a really, really good question. I walk along the streets outside. I live in a place in Brussels in a particular commune called Ixelles. And you can walk along the pavements, right? And there's these little small silver plaques, or brass plaques probably. And they sort of say, on this date in 1944, the Gestapo arrested this man and brought him away. And, he was gassed in Auschwitz a while later. And most of them are, kind of solitary resistance. And I often wonder, what was the guy next door doing? Or the guy next door, is he the only hero? Or how do you fight? What does the fight? What does the fighting entail? Some people did extraordinary things. They looked after, desperate Jewish families, or risked their lives and gave their lives. But they're a fantastically small proportion of people who actually go that far. Everybody else kind of got on with it. Probably spat at the German soldiers when they went past. Probably tried to do their little bit in the background. But is everyone supposed to be some kind of major resistance type figure? I don't know. Can everyone be a Roger Hallam? I don't know the answer to that question. Roger Hallam can certainly be a Roger Hallam, and he's a damn good one. And my idea, as I say, is to be, I don't know, John the Potato Doyle, not John pretending to be a sunflower Doyle. And I have to find a way. And living with that is something that I think is more, it's become much more somatic to me. I feel it. I don't intellectualize it. I mean, I could talk forever, as you know, but by my actions, I just feel them. Like my mates, the engineers, will come and sort of say, look, if we could take over the entire gas network, we could use this to store hydrogen. That would mean all that intermittency problem is solved. So we could do this. We could roll this out within 10 years. And then somebody else will come and sort of say, but we need to reform the wholesale electricity markets. Okay, how do we do? And suddenly there'll be a team of us working on this, 24/7, trying to get this together, having meetings, pulling people together, fail better, as Beckett said. So we keep failing better. But it takes nothing for me to jump on this and try and do this, or come up with an idea myself, or push something. Its end is failure. But that's okay too. My defeat. Khalil Gibran, worth a listen.
Does that make you sad, though, to see your efforts failing and to know that the failure of your efforts and others will result in the extinction of the human race?
I used to go around and tell people, how's your job going? And they would say, oh, pretty good. So you've been successful. I say, oh no, mine's been an absolute disaster. My self-appointed title of savior of the world isn't working out too well. I don't know why this doesn't affect me in terms of a deep personal sadness, the way that I can see that it affects, for example, Beryl. Like Beryl is sometimes, absolutely caught up, and I can see how much it hurts. but in all her brightness, I can see the pain. What do I feel? I'm 2 years into psychosynthesis therapy, loving every minute of it. So I do therapy once a week, and I meditate a bunch of times a week. And I can only think of two. I can only think of two things. It's still far too suppressed, and it won't come out. And if you were seeing the genuine me now, I would be utterly distraught. And but this is as genuine as I can be for now. But I suspect it's because this is my thinking, that not my feeling. So this is my thinking at the moment, that having had so much difficulty, isolation, and pain as a child, and you know, as the decades went by, growing into somebody who is slowly finding his place on this earth, and the joy of that. I see things inverted. I don't say, if you've kind of lived in a dungeon for 60 years and somebody says you've only got one day outside, well, you know, you're probably going to say, fuck, this is fantastic, rather than, shit, I've only got one day outside. So I'm not sure that makes sense, and I'm not even sure it's somatically or spiritually true, but it's what's currently coming out of my mouth, so I'll share it.
Thank you. Heading toward the end here.
Really? My God, that was quick.
I know, it's lovely.
Amazing. Yeah.
You and I are privileged white men in the European culture. I'm in America, you're in Europe.
Yes.
There are billions of people who do not share our privilege.
Yes.
You and I have thought about this. We've delved into the venerable philosophies, and we've found some equanimity there. There are billions of people who have not done that. I guess I would ask you,
go on, go for it. I know it's going to be hard, and just do it.
Referring,
who the fuck do I think I am, sitting here pontificating like a privileged white male? Yeah, fair enough.
Not quite. There's an element of that. You're a potato.
Yep.
I'm a sunflower.
Yep.
Beryl is cabbage. Karen is a frog, etc. We have our roles to play.
Yep.
What do we say? What do we say to people whom we meet, or with whom we are in touch, around the world, in the wide body of humanity? What can we say to be correct to them?
Okay. First conclusion would be the one that William and Beryl came to a couple of days ago. Breathe. It's the breath. Then you don't have to ask yourself. Okay. Then the right response comes. So when I breathe, I'm thinking to this. I think about a meeting I had last night with some friends. Decided I hadn't seen people in so long. I just kind of sent out an arbitrary invitation. We went to an Irish pub, drank a couple of pints of Guinness. Great fun. And everyone was, lots of my mates have been really good, taking in Ukrainian refugees, doing stuff, and it's brilliant. But there's this massive downside. 6 or 7 years ago, myself and a couple of wonderfully courageous women went down to the jungle in Calais, where all the refugees are stacked up, caused by the other wars that probably we're much more responsible for. There's loads of Afghans, there's loads of Syrians, there's loads of Iraqis. Myself and these people brought back some folks here. The two women that I was with were charged with people trafficking. All the brown people were kind of, so this wonderful welcome for all the white folks. you know, coming from the Ukraine who are suffering horrendously. I've nothing against that. But everywhere you look, it's all wrong. Every bit of it is wrong. You know, the you know, my family and my wife's family in Ireland farming cattle, for example, feeding them not beautiful Irish lush green grass, yes, to a certain extent, but also lots of that good soybean stuff that's grown in the Amazon to make them grow even faster, make more profit. Everywhere you look, it's insane. So the only place you're going to find sanity and solace is not listening to old farts like us. It's in here. It's with the breath, and it's being genuine and honest with yourself, those around you as best you can, because that's hard. That's hard. Standing up in front of people and making speeches, or you know, being brave in front of you know, colleagues who are contemptuous of your views. Or my father used to say, everybody's prepared to die for Ireland. Is anyone prepared to live for it? You know, so again, the same way, you know, we all want to do stuff for the world. Well, let's live with authenticity and as much honesty as we can summon. And very often this begins with the breath and observing what's going on with you. Then maybe you've got something to share. Because as I say, I think when I look at my years of activism, what I shared was my anger and rage at how a 1960s boy was raised in a backward Catholic Western European country with all those hang-ups. What was I actually sharing? Now, sometimes I feel I got something that I can share. So look inside you, you'll be amazed what you have to share, and trust it, because that's where the answer is going to come from.
Very good. Thank you, John. It's been a joy and an honor to speak with you. Let me remind everyone that there are videos listed in the video description of John speaking to other folks. Also, the conversation between Beryl and William, I don't know his full name, but I will track that down and put a link in the video description as well. Any last words, John?
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out, particularly for doing what's, you're right, we privileged white males, it's too easy. What we don't do very well is be vulnerable. You've had the courage to be vulnerable and to reach out. That's what it takes. Share it. It's so hard. One of my early conversations with my therapist was, well, what are you feeling now? What do you mean feeling? Like, what are you talking about? So we've had to come up with this non-violent communication term. Okay, John, calm down. What's alive in you? And that works. I can connect. Okay, because the hardest thing is begin to feel, to admit that you don't feel and begin to feel. When you feel and you begin to feel it, then you begin to be vulnerable. When you're vulnerable, the shell has begun to crack. Then you're in with a shot. Then anything can happen. If our shells crack, anything can happen. When we're in fight or flight mode, nothing happens but fighting and running.
This has been Collapse Club. That was John Doyle. I'm David Baum in Seattle. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Until we meet again, farewell.